Season 2 of Dr. Stone was easily one of the best anime of winter 2021. In fact, it was probably the most slept on anime of the season. Sure, JJK and AOT were pretty hype, but they were also just as divisive. But everyone who watched Season 2 of Dr. Stone agrees that it was incredible. This is because, like all great anime, Stone Wars is a beautiful story on its own and does a great job of adapting the source material. So in this video, I'm going to review each element of Season 2 and explain why it's a perfect anime. To do that, I invited JoJo to help me talk about the writing for this season. As you might imagine, this video will contain spoilers. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on Season 2. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment comes from Pokesel for sharing his favorite moments from Chainsaw Man. If you'd like more Dr. Stone discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. To get started, let's take a look at the animation and visuals. In a way, this is what made the first season so good. Dr. Stone is a story about the beauty of the natural world, and the visuals do a great job of reinforcing that. This includes scenes with gorgeous backgrounds, as well as objects, plants, and creatures all drawn with a great amount of detail. And this trend continues in Season 2. Every invention is introduced with tons of detail, and in addition to the great backgrounds, there's also a bunch of shots thrown in just for the sake of highlighting the environment, which I'm honestly all for. On top of that, Season 2 makes brilliant use of lighting. There's a bunch of scenes in Season 2 where the lighting really does make the scene. So much so that the lighting really is a motif for the season. An obvious example is the reunion of Senku and Tsukasa. Speaking of which, Tsukasa usually has the sun on his back, making him look like a sort of god on Earth. And hey, when you're as handsome as he is, you can get all the sun you want. But we still need to cover the animation. Unfortunately, this was one of the weaker sides of Season 1. While the animation in scenes with inventions in certain key moments was really good, for the most part it was pretty underwhelming. The animation as a whole was inconsistent, sometimes characters in the background would just look sorta dopey, and most of the action scenes used a ton of jump cuts. But Season 2 makes substantial improvements in terms of animation. Granted, some of those issues do find their way into Season 2, but they're so rare that you really don't even notice them. Background characters look much better, and the animation is way more consistent. In fact, the animation for the fights is pretty solid. But, like I said, those smaller issues are still present. While the visuals are perfect, the animation itself still has some room for improvement. So it only seems fair to give the animation and visuals a 9 out of 10. Next, let's take a look at the music and sound design. If you saw my previous video, you know I love the new OP. Admittedly, when I first heard it, the sort of laid-back vibe had me thinking it was supposed to be the ending. But this song is great and fits in perfectly with the funkier music of Dr. Stone. Is that a word? Funkier? Screw it, why not? Anyway, I know a lot of people prefer earlier openings, but this opening is full of references to the manga and highlights a bunch of themes for this season. Then you have the new ending, which is basically the exact opposite. It's literally just a sequence of Senku running, but the song is so hyped that I still jam out whenever I hear it. But now let's take a look at the actual soundtrack and sound design. Just like the visuals, the music in Season 1 does a great job of reinforcing the beauty of the natural world. The cool part is how it manages to mix a bunch of different stuff together and still work as a whole. It's this really wacky mix between modern instruments and, for lack of better terms, tribal ones. As a result, you get this feeling that, like science, the music makes use of whatever it can find to make something greater as a whole. Well, actually in science you can't do that because of equivalent exchange and whatnot, but you get the idea. Fortunately, this trend continues in Season 2. Making use of the awesome music from before, Season 2 also adds new music that contributes to each scene in different ways. For example, there's the calm music when Tsukasa is on the beach, the funky music when Kohaku attacks Homura, and the upbeat music when the team gets their steam engine. Season 2 even manages to reuse a great song from the first episode that we never heard again in Season 1, as well as the second OP in the fight against Hyoga, which, if you're like me, only made that fight even better. My only complaint, though, about the music is for a lot of the scenes by the Miracle Cave, the theme for Tsukasa from Season 1 is used a little too much. It's confusing to think that the studio added new music, but really nothing new for this season's main antagonist. But it's one isolated issue that I'm sure most people don't even notice. Now, before we move on, let's address the sound design. Just like Season 1, the sound design for Season 2 is perfect. The inventions come to life with great attention to detail, and everything breathes new life into the source material as a whole. Even something as small as Gen's transformation into Lillian is enhanced with what JoJo fans will recognize as the Golden Experience sound from Part 5. So clearly, Season 2 does an excellent job in terms of music and sound design, but there's still that issue with Tsukasa. The overuse of Tsukasa's theme might not bother most people, but the fact that there was nothing for him among the new music really just seems a bit lazy. So because of that, the music and sound design get a 9 out of 10. But that brings us to the voice acting. In general, the voice acting was just as great as it was in Season 1. Whether it's a goofy scene or a serious scene, the voice actors, or seiyuu, whatever you want to call them, are able to really bring the characters to life. This is especially clear in the scenes where the team needs to solve a problem, and then our boy Senku suddenly gets one of his evil schemes. On top of that, the casting for the new characters was spot on. The voice for Nikki was great, the voice for Ukyo, also the voice of Mr. Giorno Giovanna, was incredible. In fact, I thought the anime did a great job adapting the English scene with him and Senku, and I was pleasantly surprised with the voice for Yo. In the manga, I thought he was pretty annoying, but the anime manages to portray him as more of a lovable goofball. Personally, I think he sounds a lot like Josuke, which I know isn't the case, but I think that's pretty fitting considering both those characters are charming even though they like to make trouble. So in light of all that, I think the voice acting for Season 2 is a pretty clear 10 out of 10. Now let's talk about the writing for this season. I obviously read the manga, so I knew exactly what was going to happen. That's why I thought it'd be more fun to have someone with a fresh perspective talk about it. So without further ado, here's JoJo to talk about the writing.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Shonen Ouji channel. Yes, that's right, I'm over here now. So, Ouji was cool enough to ask me to talk about the greatness that was Dr. Stone, the Stone Wars, and in particular talk about what it is in regards to the story that I like so much. And I think the biggest part of what makes Dr. Stone Season 2 so dang great is the fact that the characters are so dang great. There's something about this series that really brings out a lot of the side characters. Just off the top, as an example, Kaseki is one of those characters who in any other show would have just been the mechanic, and you would have seen him in the background, he would have done stuff, like he would have built the thing, but he wouldn't have had much of a personality. Kaseki gets episodes and big moments to just spend to himself, right? And while he doesn't get them as much in Season 2, a lot of other characters do. Kaseki's just one of many in a big, gigantic cast, and yet at the same time, nobody really feels underdeveloped. I still feel like all the characters are properly fun. They have a personality, you are engaged with them, you care about them. And of the characters that we have this season, I think there's no better example of how strong these characters are and how they propel the story forward than Tsukasa himself. Tsukasa, being the antagonist of the series, genuinely propels the season forward in big ways. I think the fact that this whole season is basically the big confrontation that has been built up since pretty much episode 4 or 3 of Senku versus Tsukasa. You have Tsukasa finally confronting his own ideology and properly analyzing himself and admitting where he's wrong and acknowledging where he might have been right. And it's ultimately up to the viewer on who you really side with. I would certainly hope it's Senku, because Senku's logic is a little bit more sound. But there is something to be said about the fact that they do a really great job at making you understand and sympathize with Tsukasa while hopefully not quite agreeing with him. And I think that that's one of the great skills of Dr. Stone in this story, is that they craft these main characters, this antagonist and our protagonist, in such a unique way. I don't really know too many shonen series that properly develop their main character in a way that's not just main character is a good boy, he's going to do good things. Senku has always sort of straddled the line, especially this season when he's willing to blow everybody the hell up at one point, although Tsukasa does call his bluff to say, you won't do it. And Senku's like, yeah, I won't unless you force me. Right? So it's like this sort of stalemate where they both know the other person is a good man and doesn't want things to escalate. And that's the great thing, is that these two characters aren't like some noble goody two-shoes or some mustache-twirling villain. They're characters. They're people who have feelings and emotions and convictions to which they hold true. And that's probably one of the coolest things about the whole series. Just the fact that these characters are so tightly written. And I think Senku is not only one of the more interesting protagonists to come out of Shonen recently. We've had examples like Itadori from Jujutsu Kaisen, but the two of them are very strong characters. And that's not to knock other good boys who do good things characters like Deku or Tanjiro, because I love both of those characters very dearly. It's just that a lot of Shonen has good boys who do good things. However, Senku and Itadori really flip that on their head. They're much more sort of engaging characters with different personalities to what we typically see in Shonen, at least recently. And I have to give Dr. Stone a lot of credit for that, and I really have to give them credit for Tsukasa. I truly think Tsukasa is probably one of the best antagonists we've seen in Shonen in a very, very long time. Tsukasa's up there, like, in the higher echelon of my top favorite characters of all time. Like, I genuinely love Tsukasa's character. I think everything that we've gotten this whole season, especially towards the end, definitely fleshes him out, gives him a lot of depth, and makes you truly, truly care about him in ways that I just don't think you get quite often from other series. So I have to give them absolute credit on that. And again, like I said, the cast is huge. Everybody gets a chance to shine. Kohaku, Ginro, everybody gets like some kind of moment. Even characters like Hyoga get moments. You know what I mean? So it's a brilliant series, and it's one of those series that I love because it's not a story that pushes characters along. It's a story that is fueled by those characters. And I think that's what really separates Dr. Stone from a lot of other series currently airing, and it's what really drew me to the series. So that's pretty much all my thoughts. Ouji, back over to you, my dude.
Thank you, JoJo, for sharing your thoughts on the story. Spittin' nothing but facts, as per usual. I think we can all agree, with characters and a story this great, the writing for this season is easily a 10 out of 10. Finally, let's talk about the pacing. No matter how you look at it, the pacing for Season 2 is perfect. Admittedly, Dr. Stone has a recurring issue where a part of the story, like Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, ends in an awkward spot and the anime has to work around it, which is exactly why Season 1 ends in the middle of Stone Wars. But Season 2 nails the pacing. When you do the math, it comes out to around 2 chapters per episode. On its face, that might seem pretty slow, but this actually helps the pacing for the anime. Rather than speed through chapters and cut tons of material, Promise Neverland, Dr. Stone leaves plenty of room to add filler. And like I said from the beginning, this filler is incredible. It adds original content that gives manga readers an incentive to actually watch the anime, and it builds on the parts of the source material that needed to be expanded on. In particular, Tsukasa and the new characters got some great material added to their backstories. That's why, without a doubt, the pacing for Season 2 is an easy 10 out of 10. And that brings us to our final rating. We have a 9 for the visuals and animation, a 9 for music and sound design, 10 for voice acting, 10 for writing, and 10 for the pacing. That averages out to a 9.6. And this is where our ratings might split. Some people might just take this score and use it as their rating. Some people might round down to a 9.5. Personally, I prefer to pick between a 9 or 10, so that's why I'm giving Season 2 a 10 out of 10. Sure, it's not literally perfect, but to be honest, no anime is. This season may have had its minor issues, but at the end of the day, those are still just minor issues. Season 2 is a beautiful story on its own, and it's an incredibly faithful adaptation that honestly makes for a better experience than the manga. That's why, although it might not be literally perfect, Season 2 of Dr. Stone is a 10 out of 10. And that's it for this video. Big thank you to JoJo for helping out with the review. Make sure to thank him by checking out his channel for regular videos on the different anime for this season. If you enjoyed this review, then make sure to like the video. If you'd like more Dr. Stone and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.